Welcome everyone to our webinar on collaborating with career services. I, as always, am your host, Maureen McCarthy, and we're very excited that you're here joining us today. We have some very special guests, and we're really excited to have a robust discussion about the kinds of productive collaborations you can have with the career services offices on your campuses and how to approach these collaborations, what kinds of questions that may be relevant to ask as you are thinking about them, and how to make the most of your connections with the professionals on your own campuses. So today we are going to hear from a team from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee and a team from Lehigh University. So from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, we have Jean Salzer, who's the Director of Career Planning, the Career Planning and Resource Center there, and Jason Pushkar, who's an Associate Professor of English and Director of Graduate Studies of English, and also the NEH NextGen Project Director. And from Lehigh, we have Lynn D'Angelo Bello, who's the Associate Director of Graduate Student Career Development, and Jenna Lay, Associate Professor and Director of Graduate Studies in English, and our NEH NextGen Project Director. So we're going to hear from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee team first. And so without further ado, take it away, Jean and Jason.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us. I think we're going to go first because we're a little newer at this than Lehigh is, and so some of what we'll talk about is the early stages of building the collaboration that we've really only just gotten started on in the last 6 months. And then I think you'll hear from Lehigh about what that might look like a few more years down the line. So just to start with, I'll just say that we, when we wrote our application for the NextGen grant, we didn't mention career services at all. And in truth, though I'm embarrassed to admit it, I didn't know Jean, though I've been here for 11 years. And it was a reviewer of our application that said, why isn't career services involved? And so we did, upon our first meeting, immediately resolve to add her to the planning committee, and we're really glad we did. But, you know, I think that blindness that we had at the very beginning was a really telling sign of a cultural divide on campus that we've seen evidence of in a lot of other ways that we'll talk about just a little bit. I don't think most faculty in the humanities know about career services on our campus, and as Jean will tell you in a moment, career services sees very little traffic from humanities PhDs. And so even though Jean and I have found that we have a lot of interests and commitments in common and a lot of work we can do together, it's kind of amazing how little work has been done already. And I suspect that we're not unusual in that regard. I'll just give you one example. 6 months into this, I went to see Jean last week just to talk about this webinar. We were talking a little bit about Versatile PhD and Imagine PhD, and she said, well, do you know about my plan? And she pulled it up on the computer. We have at UWM a subscription service called My Plan, a career planning tool. All UWM students get subscriptions for life. It's been available this whole time. It could be plugged in immediately to anything we want to do, and it's already up and running. And so, you know, we're still learning, we're still discovering new opportunities like that. So what have we done together so far? I mean, I would say that one of the main things Jean has brought to our planning meetings has been a kind of reality check. You know, faculty tend to have one set of terms to talk about what we want to do and different kinds of employment. You know, we tend to talk about qualifications, credentials, periods, methods, areas of coverage. But employers, as I think we all know by now, talk about experience, abilities, competence, and so on. And Jean has been a really valuable translator between these two different languages. Often we find in these meetings where our different constituencies are talking about exactly the same thing but using completely different words. And Jean can often help us make ourselves understood to each other. Sometimes, though, what she does is, in her role as reality check is, you know, weigh in conversations we're having, especially when the professors start talking, which comes so readily to us. We, you know, we start brainstorming and we're full of ideas, and, you know, I'll look over and I'll see that Jean's kind of giving me side-eye from over on the edge of the table, and we turn to Jean and she says, well, yeah, but. So, you know, for For example, we were talking about internships recently. We're pretty interested in starting an internship program. And a lot of the faculty were talking about how to really integrate internships with research, right? So that there's a kind of mutual benefit here to the students' research and maybe later to an alternative career to academia. And Jean finally weighed in and said, well, that's all well and good, but remember, these employers want people to be productive, and they're paying them to do work. And so there's another side we have to think of as well, right? And if career services hadn't been at the table, that conversation never would have gotten rerouted back to that place where it would have had to have ended up eventually. So I don't know, Jean, how many months of time you saved us just with that intervention and others like it. One other thing that I think Jean has been really valuable in is helping us think about how to do better career advising along the way. We built into our proposal a pretty substantial piece called faculty education. We have an entire subcommittee devoted to trying to help faculty in general understand diverse career outcomes better and be better at guiding their students toward those different kinds of careers. You know, we kind of knew this was going to be one of our big challenges. We've never really worried too much about faculty resistance, but we worried a lot about faculty indifference, and we thought this was something they might be really indifferent to. And I think nothing has changed our opinion of that over the last 6 months or so. But I think we've also realized that many of the things we were imagining getting faculty to do within the advising relationship, Jean and her staff at the Resource Center can actually do already on their own far better and more cheaply. So, you know, now I think we've really scaled back one of our initial plans, and instead of thinking about really trying to reorient faculty sensibilities, trying to just get faculty to think about career services at all, maybe, and to outsource that kind of advising, excuse me, largely to them. Jean's so much closer to it. We'll avoid duplication of effort. We don't think faculty are that interested anyway. And it just seems like it's going to be easier for everyone. And it's kind of amazing to us in hindsight, looking back, that, you know, how did we not recognize this? Had we not recognized it, eventually, the amount of duplicated effort and wasted time would have just been colossal. A couple of other benefits I'll just mention. One of the big efforts we have underway is to put in place a system for collecting comprehensive career data for all doctoral grads. We do nothing at all like this. As you know, very few universities do. Most of the ones that do are very, very financially secure. But Jean already has to do this for our undergraduates through some state-mandated career outcome reporting, and so she already has a kind of some insight into how we might transfer that to graduate education. There are a lot of stakeholders on campus who need to be involved, and Jean is already helping kind of coordinate those efforts between alumni, development, the graduate school, her office, institutional research, and so on. And lastly, we have a really active and vibrant Preparing Future Faculty and Professionals forum at UWM, and you know, down the road I can see that we'll use that to tie in more tightly with the Career Planning and Resource Center through workshops that Jean might offer and other kinds of presentations. There are a couple practical obstacles we're already aware of. You know, how will it work if the humanities start sending Jean 40 or 50 doctoral students per semester, right? And we don't send very many at all right now. Will they need to change their staffing? Will they need to have different kinds of training for their staff? Are there ways in which we can integrate the kinds of academic job market prep that we already do within departments with the kinds of things that Jean would be better at for non-academic jobs? It seems to us that if those two things could be combined in one, you know, in one form, that would be more effective, more persuasive, less likely to have a kind of track A, track B effect. But how would that work? Departments kind of have a hold of one of these things, and they each do it independently now. And lastly, how would an organization like Jean's maintain relationships with chairs or directors of graduate study like me when people like me turn over every 3 or 4 years in these offices? It's great if Jean and I build a good, productive working relationship, but Dean's going to be here long after I've rotated out. How do we keep that going? So, those are a few things that are kind of on our radar for the future. And I'll just turn it over to Jean to say a few more words.
Hello, everyone. As we've been meeting, I have been learning more about what we need to do on our end. So with Career Services, we have a history of working with the graduate school with the preparing future faculty and graduates and professionals program. So we've been doing programming with them regarding academic and non-academic interviewing, resume and CV, cleanup, job search, that sort of thing with all of them. And the majority of the students who attend those are students who are in more professional programs in the sciences. However, there's usually a few people. As Jason mentioned, we do not see many PhD students in our career office, PhD students in the humanities. We see plenty in engineering and business and all of the other degree areas, including a lot of the social sciences. But for whatever reason, I think the PhDs in humanities, the mindset is related to becoming a faculty member, and so they tend to seek out their academic advisors or other faculty. So one of the considerations that we will need to bring in is definitely educating ourselves, doing more research, getting a truer understanding of what organizations need and how someone who has a PhD in English or communication or history can support that organization, perhaps in a way that's different and better than someone who doesn't have a PhD in that arena. Off the top of my head, when we talk about what is the market, we know that the people that successfully complete their program will be better researchers and grant writers, potentially guiding companies with strategic planning and development and that sort of thing. So we know that if the information is there, we need to find out where that market is and help organizations understand what the benefits would be to them as well. So we have this dual-sided piece, which Jason spoke about, with the faculty and the students themselves learning what their options are, and then connecting them with employers who have come to understand what their needs might be. And so there will definitely be need to bring that all together, and we don't have anything called the Career Services at the graduate school here. Our office does the work, and we're happy to do it. We would love to see something in that realm. I think something that's connected directly to the graduate school makes sense, better sense, and I think would gain a lot of faculty trust as well as student trust. But that's towards the back end. So, what does that front end need to look like? Jason brought up my plan. It's a tool that can be used by any person of any educational arena. It could be someone who's just going to get their associate's degree. The way it's set up is it supports self-assessment with the standard tools, a personality test, a skills test, that sort of thing. But then the person says how far in school they'd like to go, and from there the career options narrow down. And so it can support at least initial assessment for PhD candidates when it comes to, what might I do in addition to becoming a faculty member, and what might that look like. It's a tool that's based on things that, career offices are fairly familiar with, things like ONET, Online, Bureau of Labor Statistics, things like that. So it's common results to other tools. So I feel like there's a front-end piece that also needs to connect the faculty, be connected with faculty as well, as faculty understanding that PhD students need to have that consideration at the start rather than jumping into it after they've finished defending their dissertation and can't get a tenure track job. So I feel like it's an across the timeline sort of effort that will need to be made.
Yes, thank you very much to both of you. And we will have a lot of time at the end for questions. So if you would just hold your questions until after the Lehigh team has their say, then we will have a sort of general discussion among everyone. So I'm going to turn it over now to Lynn D'Angelo Bello and Jenna Lay from Lehigh University.
Hi everyone, this is Jenna, and I'm very excited to have the opportunity to talk with everyone about our partnership here at Lehigh. I wanted to just start out by saying a little bit about my partnership with Lynn. We've actually been working together since 2013. That's when I started as the job placement officer in the English department. And so when we were talking about this webinar, I looked back through my old emails just to see when we first connected, and it was in 2013. We had some conversations about ways that we could coordinate and do a better job of supporting our students in the English department, and so Lynn did a workshop that first fall semester that I was job placement director, and so we've worked together since then in various capacities, and I'm very glad to have her on the grant committee. So we're just going to say a little bit about why we've partnered with one another, the kinds of cultural issues that we need to consider, and the pragmatics of our collaboration. So we're going to start by talking about why we decided to partner with each other, and I'll turn it over to Lynn to think a little bit about this from the career and professional development side, and I'll chime in from the faculty side.
Sure. So certainly the issue of limited resources is a big one, and I think that's a reality across most institutions of higher education, and career centers in particular. In Lehigh's Career Center is centralized, so undergraduate and graduate career development is under one roof, and there's only one of me to meet the needs of 2,000 very diverse graduate students. So given the lack of resources and certain situations where faculty are stretched, it just really kind of makes sense to come together and pull your resources. And that kind of thinking is directly aligned with the current most common model of career development in university career centers, which is this model of communities of collaboration. There is a recognition that career services offices really can't do it alone, and that it just kind of makes a whole lot of sense to engage partners across campus because everybody has expertise to lend. Faculty certainly have advice, experiences, a certain knowledge base that they can add to the whole picture of advising and career development. So it just kind of makes sense to come together and work in a collaborative, complementary kind of a fashion whenever possible. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to follow up on what Lynn said, you know, career and professional development has limited funding. We as faculty often have limited time, and if you look around at the departments, often there's a lot of replication happening in terms of preparing students for academic jobs. And as Jason and Jean suggested, right, thinking about how you might develop a more holistic and collaborative model where that professional development is happening together rather than being separated into separate tracks, right? So it's not just, you know, my students who are thinking about non-academic jobs who can benefit from Lynn's expertise as a career advisor, but also the students who are thinking about academic jobs. And we really want to recognize that Lynn knows a lot about the needs of employers, about the different job markets out there, about how to develop a resume and really communicate one's accomplishments in that form. While faculty have their own forms of expertise, disciplinary expertise, a deep knowledge of the academic job market, and that we can come together and learn from one another in that. Next slide. Thank you. So next we want to think a little bit about cultural issues, since I know this can be a concern from both sides. So again, I'll let Lynn start that off.
Sure. So just to kind of circle back to Jason's comment earlier about the cultural divide that can exist on many college campuses, I think that it's probably fairly rare that universities will commit resources to distinct graduate student focused career center staff. I think Lehigh is lucky to have one position that's dedicated to that. But what I think is that it's important that if you're faculty and you're wanting to establish a partnership, you almost have to kind of get to know your university career center a little bit and understand what the culture is of your career center. If it is very, very heavily undergraduate focused, then it's perhaps the starting point is to begin to raise awareness of the fact that their graduate students have very different needs. Or if you have your university career center has someone that is dedicated to the graduate student population, then that's a great place to start.
And just to chime in on that, I mean, we are incredibly lucky to have Lynn here at Lehigh. At the same time, in our career and professional development office, we have separate undergraduate liaisons to each of the colleges. So there's a liaison to the College of Arts and Sciences, to the College of Engineering at the undergraduate level, whereas Lynn is responsible for all of the colleges at the graduate level. So even here we have to reckon with that emphasis on undergraduate career advising, and how can we help shift some of that focus to graduate students.
Yeah, it's both, I think, a blessing and a curse. I think when you're operating lean and mean, it forces you into these collaborative relationships. So there's definitely a positive light to all of this as well. But there certainly is a need to, immerse yourself in the experience of graduate education in order to understand it, to be effective in addressing the needs in terms of the career center perspective.
And that really brings us to some of the faculty anxieties that can come up around career advising, right? The fear that if we're sending our students to career and professional development, that this will just be turning our PhD programs into pre-professional kinds of programs, purely vocational training, and moving away from the deep disciplinary expertise and rigor that we want our students to develop, and also a concern from faculty about not being the expert in the room, right? We are very used to knowing our field very well, to, as Jason suggested, to talking a lot, right? And that importance of recognizing that faculty need to step back and see the different forms of expertise that others can bring to the table is really crucial.
Yeah, and just one final point on that. I think, too, there should be an awareness that you really can't just apply your full undergraduate model to career counseling to the graduate student population. At least at Lehigh, it really doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit very well. The needs are different. I mean, graduate students are not as homogeneous, certainly a group, as the undergraduate population. We have graduate students on Lehigh's campus who are here for as little as 1 year in some of our professional master's programs, or as long as 8 or 9 years in PhD programs. We have humanities students. We have students in STEM disciplines, in business, and in education. They are at different points in their careers. Some are very early. Some are, kind of fifth-year seniors, whereas some are well-seasoned professionals who are back in graduate school to retool for different kinds of careers. So they're at different points in their professional development. The types of professional development competencies that they have to develop are going to be different, especially when you think about some of the mechanisms that graduate students are going to use to find jobs. They're going to be relying a lot, the PhD students will be relying a lot on conferences and giving presentations. So whereas for an undergraduate suite of services, you may not focus so heavily on presentation skills, but for graduate students, you would kind of focus on presentation skills and how to talk about your research for all audiences. So a little bit different, sometimes very different, than the types of topics that you might focus on for an undergraduate population. Yeah, sure.
Let's head to the next slide. So finally, we want to talk about the pragmatics of our collaboration, right? How we've built on that communities of collaboration model, the steps that Lynn has taken, especially to really reach out to do the kinds of the needs analysis of the different kinds of graduate programs across the university, the different needs of those different types of students that she was just talking about, and to get a sense of what she might be able to do in partnership with departments and programs.
Sure. So what we did, and I will preface this first by saying that benchmarking I think is okay, but I'm not a huge fan of it because what may work for one institution may not work for another. So an approach that I took was instead to kind of go on a listening tour or kind of a review of or an internal audit, if you will, of career and professional development at the faculty level. So I invited our Director of Graduate Student Life, Dr. Kathleen Hutnick, who is like my right arm, talk about collaborative relationships. We partner closely together. We met with the faculty directors of 18 graduate programs at Lehigh, and we asked them questions to understand what the faculty felt were the most pressing career and professional development needs of their students. So we designed a list of questions. It was open-ended. They gave us their feedback, and certainly this was beneficial on several levels. Predominantly, it was a great networking exercise, and it helped to ease the flow of communication between our offices. We learned a lot about not only what some of the similarities were among departments, but also what the differences were. And they were able to help us put a rope around some particular distinct career and professional development topics that they would like to partner on. Another impetus for this, though, and again, getting back to a comment that Jason made earlier, it came to my attention that faculty were kind of duplicating what we were doing in the Career Center, and for the sake of efficiency, too, my goal in working with faculty is to work in a complementary fashion and not duplicate efforts. So the listening tour helped us get an idea of what the basic needs were. And then some of the other things that we developed is this. I changed my workshop strategy to, instead of providing general workshops that were open university-wide to graduate students, I only partner now with faculty. And I provide them during times that students are already gathered. So during weekly colloquia or professional seminar time, faculty are kind of putting me on the schedule for that. And I'm finding that I'm reaching a much more diverse group of graduate students, and not only 5 or 10 from the business college who tended to be my most common attendees. So I'm reaching a more diverse audience, and the real benefit that the faculty partnership is that the faculty do a wonderful job of adding the discipline-specific context to what I'm teaching. So they can actually give students examples, and that sometimes is when the students actually, sometimes when the learning actually takes place. So invaluable. Again, reaching more students and having the faculty there has been just an enhancement to the student learning. Some of the other things that we do is we share resources. I use, and you're familiar with the flipped classroom model. So what I do is I've created, using our learning management system, we happen to use CourseSite. I've developed a bunch of resources, and I actually, in preparation for some appointments and for workshops, the students are required to prepare by reviewing the resources that are there and applying them initially. Then the workshops that I do collaboratively with faculty have a big component that is interactive. We're engaging the students in the learning materials so that they're having a richer experience with that. We also share resources amongst our course sites or amongst our learning management system pages. So that live events are wonderful, but a drawback of them is that once the event is gone, then all the information kind of disappears. So we like to capture information and put it in one place where the students can access it around the clock. Graduate students, of course, are very, very busy. They have lots of noontime, lots of late afternoon commitments, so a big need that they have is to be able to have information at their fingertips if they can't come in for an appointment or if they can't be available for a workshop.
And just to follow up on this, 2 examples of recent workshops that Lynn has done that I know English department students attended. One was on elevator pitches, so communicating your research in just a couple of sentences. And the other that she did in the English department in partnership with our current job placement director, Amardeep Singh, was on CV to resume, and it was fantastic, and she created a PowerPoint using examples from one of our own PhD students who recently got a really wonderful administrative job, so showing what her accomplishments looked like on the CV and what they looked like on the resume, walking our students through a set of words, descriptive verbs to think about their skills and having them brainstorm together and work with her on those ideas. So it was just a fantastic workshop, and again, it was one done in collaboration, held in the department. I was there, Deep was there to demonstrate our support for what Lynn is doing. And that to me is really crucial as well, that as a faculty member, I'm communicating to students that Lynn is a resource for them and that she is someone I respect, and I really think that they can learn a lot from her. So that's really crucial, that recognition of the various forms of expertise that we all have around campus and the wonderful people around campus like Lynn, like Kathleen Hutnick, who can really contribute to our graduate students thriving, both while they're here and after they leave. And I think that's every. One more thing, Lynn?
One more point, yeah, I just wanted to kind of circle back to the point about employer engagement now. Lehigh's graduate programs are rather small, so unfortunately that is going to deter employers from developing formal recruiting relationships. So at an institution like Lehigh at our size, another very crucial partnership that I have and that I'm going to be pulling faculty into as much as I can is with our Alumni Association. And we're very fortunate at Lehigh now that we're thinking our Alumni Association is really focused on engaging alumni on a more intellectual level. So I'm kind of setting up plans to work with our Alumni Association to engage graduate level alumni with our current graduate students for things like job postings, for mentoring, for general advice, even thinking about specific carve-out networks outside of LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great tool, but I think it's restrictive for a lot of students and a lot of people from certain kinds of disciplines. So I think if you're not an institution that has a great pool of candidates, unfortunately for employers, then I think a relationship with your Alumni Association can be a nice alternative for that.
Great. Okay, so I think we're all set. We are very excited to have a conversation and take some questions.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I am going to take the moderator's privilege of asking the first question, which is, since you really segued nicely into what I wanted to talk about, Lynn, so thank you. I was wondering if you might talk a little bit, both of you, about how the connections with employers or alumni is working in the context of the NextGen planning process.
Yeah, that's a great question. So Lynn has been working on we have a series of working groups under the NextGen project, and one of them is on professional internships. So she's been working with other people around campus and employers in the local area to think about what might be possible going forward and what the needs would be on both sides. So Lynn, I don't know if you want to speak a little to that.
Yeah, so, we're in the process of, or I'm in the process of putting together a call for proposals to launch for interns over the summer. And, Jenna was good enough to invite some community nonprofit organization members to be part of my working group, which has been fantastic. So we're getting some insights from them as well. Where we are at this point is due to our relationship with another office on campus, which is Sarah's office.
The Center for Community Engagement.
Yeah. Fortunately, we have a list of employers that Lehigh already has, in the nonprofit sector that Lehigh already has a relationship with, that we're going to be approaching. So the students are actually going to be writing the proposals. I think what's tricky about internships is that they must be related to, they must be an extension of the academic experience for the student. And that's a lot easier if you are, for example, an undergraduate finance major or accounting major. However, if you have a PhD in English, how do you see that internship as related to your academic experience? So instead of, it was Jenna's idea to kind of flip that. Instead of asking the organizations to write a description for internships, we're going to actually have the students write proposals talking about what they might like to do for that organization and present it to those particular organizations. So that's how again, this is a pilot. We've never done anything like this, but this is how we're approaching that.
Yeah, and one of the really crucial things that we've thought about on our most recent core committee meeting, which Jason and Jean brought up, is what are the needs of the student doing the internship, and then what are the needs of the employer, right? Because we want both sides to feel like this is a really productive relationship, and one in which the employer is getting something that they couldn't necessarily get from an undergraduate intern, that they're getting a form of expertise from a PhD student in English or in history, the two departments on our grant, that they couldn't find with an undergraduate intern, but also that the student is doing some kind of internship project that actually does feed back in some way into their research interests. And so that's why we're thinking about it as, asking students to propose things to community organizations, especially organizations that we've identified and already partnered with, but to propose ideas to have a collaborative discussion with those organizations about what might be possible. So,
I'll just say a little bit about where we're headed in that regard. So, what I just heard from Jenna and Lynn, it's actually not so different from what we're thinking as well. We already have internship programs in English and in our communications department, two of the bigger humanities departments on campus. Those are geared more toward the professional ends of those departments, professional writing in English. But there's something institutional already in place that can be grown rather than created from scratch, and so that's very helpful to us. But we do realize that there's a problem just with administration and overhead of something like a large internship program. And so we feel like having the students actually search for their own internships, create their own internships, accomplishes two things. One, it helps us cut down on the problem of administering a program and the kind of program where we might identify internships and place students in them. But it also will get students practice at doing exactly what they're going to need to do someday anyway, which is go to Gene, learn how to set up an informational interview, create a resume, not a CV, research different employers, clarify their values, identify their skills and interests, right, and then tailor that to somebody out there somewhere. We're lucky that we're in a very large metro area with a lot of diversity of employers from extremely large companies like Johnson Controls and GE Medical and Harley-Davidson at one end to some really extraordinary small nonprofits. And so one of the members of our planning committee is the executive director of the Zeidler Foundation, or the Zeidler Center for Public Discussion, and they're doing some of the most important work facilitating conversations between local police and the African American community. So just to get to Jenna's point a moment ago about how do you make something work in English? Well, we have a lot of students in English who work on critical race theory or African American literature, and we think that a semester spent at the Zeidler Foundation would be really useful for them, no matter what period they're writing on or what particular avenue of research they have. So, we really see a huge amount of upside here, a lot of opportunity, and we've had a lot of creative thinking about how this might work. There are places where it gets difficult. If you do, early modern finance, maybe you could go work at a bank and that would help, but you know, earlier historical periods present different kinds of challenges. The one thing I do want to say is that we feel pretty confident that setting up internships, finding people willing to have interns is not a problem. The programs we already have, they are hungry for interns, they're happy to have them, it takes some work, but in terms of, you know, the big lists that we see ahead, actually finding places for interns to go is not one of them.
I think one of the bigger issues that the committee has brought up is that idea: if it is a nonprofit, will they have funding to pay an intern? And who is a PhD student who's already not making a whole lot of money, and how is that going to work out with their academic progress toward the degree and that sort of thing? So trying to come up with some options on that end is definitely something that we are looking at from the career services side, trying to connect with companies that would more than likely have money and or have a foundational connection to a nonprofit. So the company's foundation perhaps supporting the nonprofit in having an intern.
Great, thank you. I'll just want to remind everyone that there are two different ways to ask a question. You can either raise your hand or type it into the question box. Melissa Bacovoy from the University of New Mexico has a number of questions and is very eager to talk about this. So Melissa, if you're there, I'm just going to unmute you and you can prioritize what question or questions you'd like to ask the panel.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. I wasn't sure. All right. We at our last seminar, we talked about trying to make graduate assistantships portable because we actually here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, we're not a large major metropolitan area, and so we were trying to think, you know, going a bit broader as well as kind of making sure that our students can take the opportunity to do an internship as well as possibly also get some research done. So we talked to our graduate dean, and we're thinking about allowing a student one semester of their funding package to make it into basically what we can administratively call a program assistantship. And as long as it can be justified as part of their graduate training, they can take their assistantship and take it to, they could go up to Santa Fe and work in government offices. They could go to Los Angeles and work at a museum if they have a connection there. So that's one of the ways we're trying to think about the funding for some of the internships, particularly for those that might not have money for internships but might be interested in having the type of skills and expertise that one of our history PhDs could offer, as well as English or American Studies or linguistics who have heard of our team. So that is that's kind of one way that we're thinking about doing it, as well as using them in terms of our own university administrative offices. So those are just a couple of things. I guess it's really not a question, but has anybody played around with the assistantships?
We've been thinking about that at UWM as well, you know, for a couple different reasons. One is that, as Jean just said, you know, some of the places we think our students would be most eager to go, nonprofits, are going to be the ones that have the least ability to actually compensate them, you know, using a kind of traditional internship model. You know, exactly how that's going to work out, we're not quite sure yet. We think it might be easier to make a case for it in a department like history that doesn't have as much built-in undergraduate teaching and TA opportunities than in, say, my department, English, where we have many hundreds of sections of freshman comps that we have to staff. So, yeah, we think that's also a really interesting and appealing possibility. I think we're a little also daunted, though, by the details, the funding details. How will we make that work? Will the deans cough up that much money to fund that many graduate students, or how many will they be willing to fund? But, you know, we certainly agree with you that there's a fundamental problem in terms of finding places that can pay for interns that are also the places our graduate students want to go.
And we've been thinking about this in kind of two ways. So we have a lot of opportunities, and I know many of you do, a lot of opportunities that are available on campus and many different offices on campus where our students can get different forms of expertise. So that's something in the English department. We've been developing partnerships with our Office of Multicultural Affairs, with the Women's Center, with the Center for Community Engagement, with the Office of First Year Experience, to give our students opportunities to have positions in those offices rather than teaching first year writing for a year, which is where most of our students are funded. So we've done that kind of switch. We've been talking as we were thinking about ways for students to get experience off campus. So we're funding internships this summer through the NEH grant. So that's a funded opportunity. In the future, whether we'll be able to raise money for that is partly about, whether our dean, whether our provosts are willing to commit money to that. If not, we've talked about other models, and I know others have considered these as well, models like developing a course so that students are receiving credit for the internship and could pursue it during the semester rather than over the summer. So building it into the, as a kind of add-on to the curriculum in some way so that they're able to do it while pursuing other coursework or in the early stages of a dissertation project. All of that's really tricky and requires thinking carefully about the curriculum and time to degree, but that's one of the ideas we've been kind of floating in our group.
We've been exploring something like that as well, for similar reasons, because, certainly in English and communication, most of the graduate students at the PhD level are supported by TA-ships. And so, if they're going to retain their TA-ship and the TA-ship can't directly be transferred into support for an internship, then where are they going to find the time to do their courses and their TA-ship, right, and an internship on top of it? So if they could take something for credit, we think that would be a really useful way around it. I mean, even if it happens later in their graduate career after coursework, the TA-ship would cover the tuition, but the course would be the internship itself.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to turn it over to Russ from the University of Iowa. Russ, I'm going to try and unmute you if you'd like, and if you'd prefer not to, just let me know and I'll read your question. But right now you are unmuted. You're available to the world. So go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, sure. I was wondering if you could speak more about the process of translating the culture of career services to the culture of academic disciplines. And where are the areas where you found common ground, and then what are the stumbling blocks to these cultural connections?
Ian, do you want to take that one?
I'm going to let Lynn start.
Okay.
Well, safe space, right?
Let us have it. You can say.
Again, I think you're right. I mean, it's just a reality that it's almost the white elephant in the room. You have to, you kind of have to know, again, how severe is there this cultural divide in terms of undergraduate focus versus graduate focus, but even in terms of faculty versus career center staff. And I think, just to be honest, the way I've navigated this, certainly respecting the role that faculty play and respecting that they're inundated with teaching students, right? That's their primary role. It's a lot of it is just very basic networking. Networking is the giving principle. So if I've ever approached a faculty member or a dean or associate dean, I've always had something to offer. Like, I have this great idea to do. I would love to do this program for your students. What do you think? Instead of, I think that if you approach it by asking, how do you think we should collaborate? you're setting the stage for people to think about what the Career Center does not do for your students. And you get a lot of, well, you don't do this, you haven't done that. So I think a great approach can be, whether you're a faculty member approaching a Career Center or a Career Center staff person approaching a faculty or a department chair, is to say, hey, I have this idea that I think would work really nicely with your students. It's almost like the olive branch. What do you think of that? And let the relationship be based on that.
And Lynn, can I ask you actually to say a little bit more about your listening tour? Because I know, and hopefully I'm not putting Lynn on the spot here, I know that you had different kinds of conversations with different grad program directors. Yeah. So without naming names or departments, would you be willing to kind of speak to what some of the maybe resistances might have been and what some of the more positive experiences might have been?
Sure. Well, it was interesting. Unfortunately, I think the population of students who maybe have the least amount of recognition are the master's level students. Mm-hmm. We had some faculty that just see or envision their master's level students as vehicles to fund their PhD students, so they don't really put a whole lot of time and attention into advising a career and professional development for master's level students. So we saw, but overall, I do want to say that all of our faculty directors really did express care for the, for taking care of their students. Sometimes there were situations where we encountered resistance with kind of the words, "We're not ready." We're not ready to take this step forward. We want to continue doing things the way we've always done them. And I respect that, certainly. I'm certainly not going to, encroach upon someone's, their philosophy. But I think that all you can do in that situation is just keep in contact and keep offering suggestions. When if the time comes when someone's going to turn a corner, then it will come. That's just the way I approach it. I'm not sure. Did that answer your question? I'm not really sure.
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
So I do have a comment based on what you were talking about, Lynn, was with regard to making the connection. We do a lot of programming at the request of undergraduate instructors and faculty for various programs, and so trying to make connections that way. Knowing that we're already teaching their undergraduate students or graduate students, perhaps not PhD students, working with them and hoping to make connections on that side. One of the things that also occurs to me is that if we're talking about supporting career development that may go beyond academia or outside of academia, that the departments should have some understanding that that is a real possibility. And so part of it's educational. But when I brought this up to the group, the history department actually requires that their PhD candidates define what their perhaps alternative career path is. So I think that there's some faculty that are already very much connected with the idea and willing to make the connections, that we can utilize those faculty to help guide faculty who may have some resistance.
Yeah, great point, great point. Building on all the positive foundations that you already have, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Russ. I'm going to go back to a question that Melissa submitted earlier, and because I think that this is a good way to think about how NextGen programs might be able to give something to career services rather than just sort of benefit from their expertise. And so I was wondering if Jean or Lynn, you could talk about maybe how your work is evaluated and how success is measured for you, and whether or not collaborating with the NextGen program might be able to help you in sort of meeting your goals as a center or in your position, Lynn.
Yeah, sure. So actually I'm one of the reasons I'm so happy to be part of this particular grant is that Jen and I have had conversations about this and adding an assessment component to it. I think there should be a critical reflection part to do just that, to evaluate our students really learning from the experience. Unfortunately, again, since I'm a one-person shop in our Career Center, so I'm doing a lot of the higher level strategic planning, and I'm in the trenches doing the appointments and the workshops and the collaborations and blah, blah, blah. I have not had, I don't have an assessment plan or an assessment strategy in place. Also, again, because there's nobody really asking for that. We're not a state institution where we have to come up with assessment outcomes, although that doesn't mean that's not something I don't want to do. So this is going to be a nice opportunity for me to pilot an assessment strategy. So again, that's going to be something that I'm going to be working closely with Jenna on to make sure that as the students are engaging in these out of the classroom experiences, that there are particular learning goals and objectives, and that we have some sort of metrics or some sort of rubrics that we're using so that we're getting a real sense of whether or not, or what kind of learning is really taking place. So, there's going to be a big focus on transferable skills. I think that, when it comes to humanities, folks studying humanities, a thread that's going to lead these folks to their, post-academic job, if it's outside of the academy, is going to be transferable skills. So I think there are a lot of different things that we can be evaluating, but no, I don't have a formal assessment plan yet.
And Lynn, do you think that this work and developing some of those ideas, will that help you both within career and professional development and then within the university as a whole? Will it help you to make arguments for greater resources, greater support, greater funding? Do you see that as a kind of possible?
Yes, I think so. I think these types, assessment is a vehicle to kind of raise the status of a career center, is what I'm hoping, and to show them that what we're teaching is effective, and then to be able to show outcomes in terms of jobs that our students are learning, jobs that our students are landing in. I'm hoping that can possibly lead to convincing the powers that be that more funding is needed. But it's a lot. It's complex. There are a lot of pieces, but that's my hope.
Can I chime in?
Please do.
Yeah. Oh, so as a public institution of higher ed, we indeed have our bits and pieces. UW-Milwaukee went through institution-wide accreditation 2 years ago, and one of the areas that we were, shall we say, scolded on by the commission was that the student affairs, and that's where career planning is in student affairs, did not have learning outcomes. So student affairs as a whole in my department recently went through development of learning outcomes for a variety of pieces, one of which includes working the one-on-one side. So what are students coming away with when they're doing the one-on-one side? Anecdotally, we know that our programs are appreciated. We don't have any set assessment yet, but I think that's a fairly easy jump for the people who are attending programming. But this is definitely, this webinar has definitely given me some ideas on different ways that we can look towards assessing the efforts that we make as we're going through with this.
Can I just ask Jean to follow up? In addition to assessments, though, part of the original question too is, what can career services get out of the NextGen affiliation? I mean,
well,
how can we help you?
So my department just went through strategic planning a year ago, and our big goal is to infuse career into the curriculum so that faculty are considering that as they're teaching. We know, if you have followed anything political in the past year or so, you may know that Scott Walker is all about jobs. And so it has moved into the public institutions of higher ed land, and so that it's all about the job. And so we are, as not just because of the job idea, but we wanted to help to work together with faculty to help support students as a means of supporting retention. And this is at the undergraduate level. However, I believe it will spread, that the faculty that supports students figuring out what is the purpose of English and what is the purpose of communications, that students are bound to stick with their plan and have some understanding that they wouldn't necessarily have otherwise understood from their English 101 class or their Com 101 class. So that actually is, so this program is actually going to support that, which I'm grateful for.
That's wonderful, and I'm really glad to hear that. And I would imagine that that's the case at institutions across the country, or at least I hope so. That is a goal of career services in other places as well. So I guess the lesson is that the best way to find out is to ask. So I'd encourage everyone on the webinar and everyone listening to the recording to connect with your career services professionals on your campus if you haven't already, and start a conversation. Ask them what their goals are, tell them what your goals are, and see if there are opportunities to collaborate, share resources, and information with each other, because it seems like this is a real opportunity for both entities to really advance their goals together. So with that, I'd like to thank all of our panelists today. Thank you so much for giving us the benefit of your expertise and your experience. And we recorded this webinar, and it will be available to the consortium on the consortium resource page. And I think that's it. So thank you very much for participating, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen.
Thank you.